I believe the Secretary Chow made the right decision that it was important for the Office of the Secretary to ensure that there was a full and efficient response to those oversight requests. So what we were doing was attempting to facilitate the response to the oversight requests, not impede them, not block them or stonewall the requests.
I'm going to have to cut you off there because I do have a couple of additional questions, but you can more fully answer, if you would like, in writing after the hearing. I want to just ask a series of yes or no questions. Yes or no, do you support privatizing the air traffic control system?
This is not This is not something I'm going to propose or push to the Secretary.
Do you support eliminating or defunding the Essential Air Service?
As I've discussed, no.
Do you support reforming or repealing the Jones Act?
No.
Do you support eliminating federal discretionary grants at the Department of Transportation?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to congratulate you, Mr. Bradbury. Enjoyed our visit in the office, and I think that your track record and your results-oriented leadership puts you, in a really good position to help lead this department that, in many ways, has sort of lost focus of its core mission. I also point out, I've seen you in this committee more times than I ever saw Pete Buttigieg, which is an interesting little fun fact. I want to talk to you a little bit. What we in our office, we talked about sort of 21st century airports, and having grown up in the shadow of Lambert in St. Louis, it's sort of embarking on this new mission. There's a lot of opportunities, and we talked about it. But I just wanted to reinforce the point. Look forward to working with you on that, and maybe have you come out to Missouri and see not just Lambert but some other DOT assets.
Thank you, Senator. I look forward to that too.
On the topic of on infrastructure in general, China is in many ways coming for our lunch on a whole host of things, and they're moving at rapid speed on a lot of things. Infrastructure projects clearly in their own country, but the One Belt, One Road initiative in our country is sort of, hopefully we get back to focusing on real transportation projects here, not woke taglines. What are some things that can be done to help streamline that process, approvals? Could you talk a little bit about maybe some challenges with the way currently NEPA plays out in these projects?
Absolutely. We have a real opportunity to undertake some fundamental review and reform of the NEPA process and the permitting. Obviously, it's a critical priority for the president because infrastructure projects depend on those permits getting efficiently resolved so that the projects can move forward. The president has issued an order to ensure that that happens. I think there's going to be a complete review of the regulations across the executive branch. Each department and agency with an important stake in infrastructure projects will be redoing their NEPA regulations. And I look forward to working with CEQ, Council of Environmental Quality at the White House, and all the other departments and agencies in a cross-government effort to streamline NEPA, and there's a lot that can be done to streamline it and focus the review on the types of issues that I think Congress intended when it conceived of NEPA. It should not hold up projects for years.
Well, in the interim, between your time previously and now, a couple significant court cases have been handed down. EPA versus West Virginia, the major questions doctrine, and of course, the Loper-Bright case where the Chevron deference was overturned, thankfully. Could you just talk a little bit about how you see the interaction between the department and the legislature changing a little bit, or kind of what you foresee with the shifting tides here?
Oh, absolutely. With the Loper-Bright decision, it's very clear we can't creatively interpret statutes to expand our authority into new areas. That's discretion that resides with Congress in terms of changing, expanding the law and the jurisdiction of agencies. And I think the courts are going to be stricter now in interpreting statutes to ensure we stay in our proper bounds. And the major questions doctrine, very important. And I think that implicates some of the things that DOT has been doing in recent years. When it comes to massive new regulatory efforts on the part of departments like DOT that have economic impacts for the lives of Americans across the economy, it's clear the Supreme Court has said, no, wait a minute, there's got to be a clear authorization in statute from Congress before the agency can entertain that kind of transformational rule. And I really think that's a critical restraint, and we see that with, I believe, with the CAFE program, for example.
Great, I appreciate that. One last question. So under the FAA, I think we talked about this in my office, is the Office of Commercial Space Transportation, or AST, which is responsible for licensing and regulating all commercial rocket launch and reentry activities. AST is a mess, a total mess right now. Would you work with me on helping try to streamline that and cut out some of the, I think, the bureaucracy and get things right with AST?
Absolutely. You know, we did work hard to streamline the commercial space launch regulations last time, but it's clear as the cadence of launches increases, we need to do much more. We need to streamline it further. It's an important function, but we need it to be much more efficient.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I'll take the promotion. Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Bradbury, thank you very much. I grew up reading the science fiction writer Ray Bradbury, and obviously Butte's a long way away from his.
सिर्फ नजर बट्टू लगाने से बिजनेस बढ़ता तो हर बड़ा बिजनेस यही करता। बिजनेस बढ़ता है क्रेडिट से। अपनी दुकान में क्रेडिट ऑन यूपीआई अपनाओ। कस्टमर्स को यूपीआई पे क्रेडिट मिलेगा तो कस्टमर्स बढ़ेंगे और उनकी शॉपिंग भी। क्या समझे? अपने पेमेंट पार्टनर से संपर्क करें।
That's 10 fun rainy day activities in the city.
Where is that?
List the places mentioned in this video and save it as a note.
Bad day, quick fix, save it, one list, found it oh so quick.
Wow, cool. Museum sounds good.
Being high on marijuana and driving, and it's a growing problem in the country. I think NHTSA has put funds in and worked with local first responders and local sheriff's offices on training for local police and sheriffs and first responders who get to a scene to assess whether a driver is high on marijuana. And it's really a physical assessment at the scene. And it's very important to have that training and capability available with our local law enforcement and first responders. So there needs to be a lot of support for that, and I believe that the Justice Department could play an important role there through justice grants, programs, and their law enforcement relationships. So that's certainly the first way I would think about assessing that. I know that there are technological solutions that are being discussed and are potentially on the horizon, and that Congress has directed the department, NHTSA in particular, to look at those options for potentially being part of a new motor vehicle. And that's something we need to take a hard look at. I'm not sure that the accuracy and reliability is yet there, but we need to continually assess the availability, the cost of that technology, the accuracy and the reliability, because that could be a solution, but it needs to be something that's accepted by the American people if you're going to talk about something that you put in a new motor vehicle.
Right. It'll take the right process to get there, to make sure that people buy into it.
I think we're closer for drunk driving, and that's something that may be on the horizon, and is very important, as you say, 13,000 drunk driving deaths a year. We got to get that number down.
That number, just so you're clear on it, per lane miles driving, that number has plummeted over the decades. So The National Highway Transportation Safety Board has done a pretty good job on that, but 13,000 is too many. It wasn't too long ago that it was 30,000. In terms of aviation safety, we're seeing too many accidents, you're aware of that, and they're not all at major airports. I look at airports and so much of it is the volume and they're big enterprises. DIA in Denver International Airport is a massive enterprise. And I was concerned with some of the recent formulas. Now we're going to look at birth rates in your state as a function of how some allocations of federal infrastructure investments will be made. That's concerning, but I also look at it in terms of the smaller airports, which, again, in some of the western states, we don't have that high birth rates, and we do, obviously, as certain people try to encourage that as much as possible. But we've always pursued efficiency when we look at government spending and our workforce and try to target clear goals on things like public safety. And I think in terms of our small airports, what's your sense in being able to make sure that we have the staff and the staff with the proper experience to be able to address this at a time when we're facing cutbacks? And I worry that those are in many cases, are viewed as the people that are most expendable. Is there some commitment you can give us to make sure we preserve and if anything, expand that skill base within our workforce?
I'm sorry, Senator, you're talking about staffing at airports, airport authorities staffing?
Through the FAA. So the Air Force authorities are more autonomous, but to a certain extent, the infrastructure in those small airports is coming, in most cases, it's a blend of federal dollars and local dollars.
That's right. That's right. The grants that FAA administers for new terminals, new runways, et cetera, expansions at airports, a very sizable grant program that is administered by FAA. And certainly we need the staff at FAA to administer the program effectively. And I think as we look at achieving greater efficiencies, doing more with less at the Department of Transportation, it's incumbent on the Secretary, and I will help him in this regard, to ensure that those cuts are done in a way that preserves our capability. We have the adequate staff to administer the programs that by law we need to administer. And those are important ones.
I appreciate that, and making sure we have the adequate staff, I think, is the key word there. I yield back to Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Moran.
Chairman, thank you. Mr. Bradbury, welcome to committee. Nice to see you again. I think that some of the things that, at least one of the things I will ask you has been asked, but I have to do it and hear it from you as well. This is not that topic, but we were clearly involved, this committee, in the FAA reauthorization. We made significant attempts in the FAA's aviation rulemaking role to improve the ability for the FAA to timely provide answers and provide technical standards to enable new innovation in aviation. I come from the air capital of the world, where we manufacture many of the planes that are flown today, general aviation and commercial. And the challenges we face in keeping up with technology and safety are significant. And in part, the challenges are attributed to the need for an additional level of workforce at the department for purposes of completing the tasks, but also having a workforce that has the necessary technical and experience capabilities. You need an experienced workforce so that we can, again, provide safe and highly technical advice and approvals at FAA. What would you tell me to make me feel comfort? In large part, I'm asking you how you will implement the FAA reauthorization bill.
Well, thank you, Senator. I really appreciate what Congress has done with FAA reauthorization and the support for the aviation system, the safety of the system, but also the technical upgrades that are needed. And that's a major focus I know for the Secretary. We're looking at it in terms of air traffic control, but as you suggest, it implicates all aspects of aviation industry. And it's critical for FAA and Department of Transportation as a whole to stay up to pace with developments in technology. And I think that's a new sort of attitude and approach that's being brought to bear right now by the President and the Secretary across the board. we need the latest tools, we need the latest data and data analytics and computer capabilities. I think that is what the Secretary is bringing to bear in looking at the systems and ensuring that they are up to speed, improved, et cetera. And we need the people at FAA and in the department who are capable and knowledgeable about that. So I mean, it's a big emphasis. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I mean, the promulgations of rules, the policy and guidance has to be timely and accurate, appropriate, and that requires a highly educated, trained workforce, as well as a mindset and leadership that recognizes its importance. This is the question that I think you've been asked before, because this is a very rural committee, but essential air service is a hugely significant component. Kansas has 5 airports that utilize essential air service. We are one of the most prolific essential air service states in the country. And I know that you've written about this, but I think you've indicated in your testimony that you will be supportive of essential air service. And I want to ask that question: do you support essential air service program? And if confirmed, will you support it in your role as the Deputy Secretary?
I will, Senator. The President and Secretary have made very clear firm support for essential air service. It's clear that the Congress as a whole and this committee strongly support it. And I don't know that I've personally written on essential air service. I know some of the theoretical arguments for and against, and the fact that it was originally intended to be temporary. It's obviously important, and Congress has made the judgment that it's here, and we need to support it. So I'm definitely on board with that.
I appreciate that answer, and I'm sorry that I suggested you wrote about something that you may not have written about. Again, I don't know whether this has been asked this morning, but we are still in recovery in Kansas and across the country with the disaster, the tragic accident that occurred at Reagan several weeks ago now. I have an agreement with the FAA, the Secretary, that the operations in regard to the Army helicopters at Reagan will remain paused during the NTSB investigation, and that we would be notified if there was a plan to change that feature. Does that comport with what you know? I should feel comfortable in believing that still to be the case today.
I'm not up to speed on that. I mean, I don't know, but I'm sure the Secretary will follow through on his commitment to you, and I certainly would support that. It seemed to me that was a horrible accident that was entirely avoidable, and just a terrible tragedy.
And I think I've got 19 seconds, but I'll yield back to the chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Kim.
Thank you. Thank you for coming before us. I guess I just wanted to start by talking about, a massive priority in New Jersey. I mean, one of the largest construction infrastructure projects in the nation is occurring right now between New Jersey and New York, called the Gateway Project. And I know that, the federal government can get involved in every single infrastructure project, every single transportation project in the nation. But, I believe that there needs to be some process of triaging and prioritizing. So I guess I just wanted to ask you, do you believe that the Gateway Project is a critical infrastructure project that has both regional and national implications?
Yes. As I mentioned to you yesterday, I definitely view that as a project of national importance. And we need to ensure that it's done efficiently and that the dollars are well spent. That's true for every major infrastructure project we fund, but that connection up and down the Northeast Corridor and from New Jersey to New York, and the role that the New York metropolitan area plays, certainly of national importance.
Yeah. No, I don't discount the need to be able to make sure we're being good stewards of the resources of this nation. And, this project so far is on time and under budget, so, we're excited about that. I guess I wanted to ask you, can we count on your support to be able to keep this project going, keep the funding going? It's already underway, and obviously, as you know, putting the brakes on any construction project, let alone one of this magnitude, can just be really debilitating and honestly raise costs even more. So I just wanted to hear from you if we can count on your support for this.
Well, I will support the Secretary in the department's commitment to projects such as a Gateway project. And so I will not be making that decision, any of those decisions myself, but I understand the importance of the project. I worked on it the first time around. I think we had a good discussion about the tunnels and what could be done with the existing tunnels and the new tunnels that are in the plan. I would hope to be involved in a very supportive way in helping the Secretary follow through on these projects.
As we're investing in this, a big reason why we're doing so is to be able to make transit, especially for passengers, commuters, more reliable. Amtrak, I told you about the challenges we face with NJ Transit as well. A lot of questions about funding for Amtrak, a lot of proposals in the past here in this building about slashing Amtrak funding. Do you think Amtrak is funded to the level that it needs to be? Do you believe that there is room or your perspective for cuts or greater investment?
Well, I think that it's always incumbent on us to take a hard look at how the money is being spent and whether it is achieving the goals, whether the system is being operated efficiently.
Well, I guess I'll ask you, do you think that the funding for Amtrak is achieving its goals? From your experience before at the Department of Transportation, what did you feel?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we were very hopeful back at the end of 2019. We were looking at coming into a new year where for the first time Amtrak was projecting it would be in the black across its network. And of course, then the bottom fell out with COVID. I look forward to taking a hard look, Senator, to be frank, because there's a lot of money in the system.
Yeah.
We just need to ensure that it's appropriate and it's being well spent.
I don't discount that. It's just, I hope I can hit home to you just how critical this is for reliability and for the ability for people to get to and from work. I want to just build on something. One of my colleagues asked you about your role your perspective on privatization of air traffic controllers. You said that you weren't going to necessarily be the one that pushes that proposal forward, but I guess I just wanted to ask you, do you believe that privatizing air traffic controllers is a good idea?
Well, Canada has done this with transferring air traffic control to a nonprofit corporation. There were, it was seen as a very efficient solution. And as I think you know, Senator, President Trump did put forward the idea and support the idea in 2017. Congress, in its judgment, deliberated over it and did not accept it. And again, we see in the recent FAA reauthorization, as I understand it, there were further debates. And again, it was not something that was made part of FAA reauthorization. And so my comment is that I don't anticipate that I will be spending time promoting or pushing the Secretary of Transportation to recommend to the President this, because it just isn't something that's been embraced by Congress as a whole. There are good arguments for it. It may be a good solution down the road, but that will be for Congress to judge and decide.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Bradbury, and as I recognize myself right now to speak. Let me ask you a question. You're being asked to be confirmed as the Deputy Secretary of Transportation for the United States of America. So first question I'd ask you is, what's the most common form of transportation that Americans use on a day-to-day basis?
The automobile. Americans love their cars, and we have billions of trips by auto every year in the United States.
So let's talk about the car business, something near and dear to my heart. What is the impact of regulation after regulation after regulation on the auto industry in terms of the cost of automobiles?
Well, regulations have costs, and those costs are passed by the manufacturers down the line to the American families, the Americans who buy those automobiles or want to try to buy those automobiles. So the effect is on affordability of new automobiles, and that's a critical issue. We want new automobiles to be affordable. We want Americans to buy more new automobiles. And it's not just to support the auto industry as an important part of our industrial base, but it's because new cars and trucks are safer, significantly safer than old used vehicles. NHTSA statistics show that. So affordability isn't just an economic issue, it's a safety issue too.
Well, thank you for that. And if you look at the constitutional role of the federal government, would you agree that it's uniquely the role of the federal government to regulate interstate commerce?
Yes, the Constitution gives that to Congress.
So meaning that I think what the founders had in mind is not give any individual state the ability to do something different that would impede interstate commerce. So the idea that, hey, we're a united country and we should have standards that when they cross state lines, that you have one federal standard. Is that fair to say? Is that what you think they had in mind?
Yes, and I think that's what they have in mind for the CAFE program, for example, the fuel economy standards. One of the things we emphasized in the first Trump administration was the goal of having one federal standard for fuel economy in the United States. I believe that's what Congress decided on, and it's important that we have that consistency. You cannot really build different fleets of vehicles for different states in the United States. That's not an efficient way for an auto manufacturer to function.
Because again, it adds cost to the car and it adds cost to the government because the government has to look at these waivers. So in your mind, when you have California that's had a carve out for 51 years, the ability to set a different set of emission standards, has that made the auto industry healthier or less healthy?
Well, I do think, as you indicated, it has imposed costs that are passed along to car buyers all over the country, in every region of the country. Now, when Congress first conceived of this exception for California, it was because of the terrible smog experienced in the LA basin primarily. New vehicles have gotten much cleaner in terms of those smog-causing pollutants. So I think there's a real question whether it still makes sense. But when you start talking about the climate regulations, the greenhouse gas restrictions and carbon dioxide restrictions that California's put on automobiles, inevitably that affects the fleet across the country, and it affects the affordability and costs that American families are forced to pay for new motor vehicles in every region of the country.
So it's fair to say that the people I represent in the state of Ohio are paying more money for the automobiles that they buy because of rules by out-of-control bureaucrats in California.
That is fair to say, yes.
And interestingly, because I think we'll go back to the Constitution, I think what the Constitution had in mind is they didn't want to have crazy state people making decisions for the rest of the country. And when you have California, which is saying, hey, by 2030, you can't basically have 2/3 of the cars have to be electric, and by 2035, all of them have to be electric. Actually move that forward. It seems like those are guidelines that Greta Thunberg thinks is a good idea, but I don't think automotive engineers would think it's a good idea. I'll ask you this, Mr. Bradbury, straight up. I think senators think they're pretty powerful people. I think politicians think they're pretty powerful people. Do you think politicians can bend the laws of physics?
No, I don't, nor the laws of economics.
I don't know that they know that, because I think when you look at it and say, well, let's do more on cafe centers, reduce this, and look, we're all for that. I don't think there's anything special about California or Californians that they should have better air than Ohioans. I just think that we have to be realistic about what's technologically possible. And I think it's well past due after 51 years that we go back to our constitutional principles of one federal standard that is actually achievable and attainable based on what we understand technology to be. And I also think, and I want to ask your response to this, do you think that giving the industry certainty, saying, hey, here's the rules of the road for the next 10 years so that they don't have to worry about some lunatic in California coming up with a rule that's completely unattainable. Do you think that that would be healthy for our auto industry to compete worldwide?
Landscape, and you hear from automakers all the time that that's the last thing they want to see is those swings. And but as you say, regulations can't achieve an aspirational result that's not really consistent with economics or, as you point out, the laws of physics. So I think we need one reasonable federal standard, and I really believe that's what Congress intended, particularly for the fuel economy program.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Look forward to working with you once you're confirmed.
Thank you, Senator Moran.
Now recognize Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bradbury, thank you for being with us today. I'm going to start with some yes or no questions, and I'd appreciate it if you could just keep them to simple yes or no's, if at all possible. Will you follow the law?
Yes, Senator.
Yes or no, Mr. Bradbury, is improving safety on our roadways a priority for you?
Yes.
Yes or no, do you believe that technology plays a role in making cars safer?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes or no, do you support the utilization of technology in cars to reduce collisions like radar and LiDAR?
Yes, and I see a lot of positive innovation, a lot of investment in these new technologies, which really have a great potential to save lives.
Appreciate that. Yes or no, do you support the utilization of advanced driver assistance systems to reduce roadway fatalities?
Again, yes, we see the automakers investing in this. We see car buyers interested in the technology, and it has great potential to help save lives. This is a different question from whether technology should be mandated by the federal government to be a required component of every new vehicle. That's a calculus, a cost-benefit calculus, because again, we can go as 100% on everything as a mandated requirement of the federal government, but it's going to affect the bottom line. It's going to affect the affordability of vehicles, and that always has to be kept in mind. And one thing that's critically important is to preserve the incentives that the industry has to invest in this new technology and continue the improvements, not necessarily dictated by the government to do it, but to do it because it makes their products better, more attractive, more valuable to customers, and safer. And safety has got to be the objective, but affordability is an unavoidable component of that.
Which is more important?
It's safety is always, of course, more important.
I appreciate that. You answered the question.
But if people are not buying...
If I maybe I'm almost out of time, Mr. Bradbury. I appreciate you saying that because safety matters. People die on the roads.
Too many people die.
In the early 1990s, I was hit head-on by a drunk driver. Thank God I'm here. But there's 10,000 people a year who are not.
That's right.
You know them, we know them, my colleagues know them.
And 40 to 41,000 fatalities on America's highways every year. That number is persistent, and we need to drive it down.
Sadly, it is. I appreciate you saying that. Do you support autonomous vehicles?
Oh, I'm very excited about autonomous vehicles.
Would you mandate this technology in autonomous vehicles?
Mandate what technology?
Everything I just went over, radar, LiDAR, all of these safety features.
We need a consistent national framework for the development of autonomous vehicles, automated vehicle technology, autonomous vehicles.
I appreciate that. Would you mandate technology in autonomous vehicles, or if someone creates an autonomous vehicle, they can just do whatever they want based on making it more affordable?
Those are not the two choices, Senator. I would be reluctant to mandate a menu of technologies and tell the industry how the vehicle needs to operate. I think we want to preserve incentives to innovate and offer new products, and then we need to ensure safety through a process of certification or a process of testing. And that's really what we need, is a framework that's reliable, repeatable for testing autonomous vehicle systems to ensure safety. And then, this is the way our system has worked for auto safety in this country. Other countries may do it differently. They may dictate up front what the requirements are and require sort of pre-approval certification. We recognize that we want to preserve incentives for investment and improvements in industry, subject to testing. And then, of course...
Let me ask this question, Mr. Bradbury. Do you support the use of driver monitoring technology both inside and outside the car?
I think that is a question that will depend on the accuracy and reliability of the technology and the cost impact of the technology. And as I indicated, I look forward to, and I know this is a subject of great importance to you, in particular, and to many members. I look forward to working with you and members to understand better the capabilities of the technology, and I look forward to talking with the folks at NHTSA as they've collected comments and input in connection with their, it really was an advance notice, a proposed rulemaking.
Mr. Bradbury, you on your own submitted some comments to the record in this case, and you said that, quote, if NHTSA were to mandate installation of technologies that could at any point take over control of a vehicle on the road, all Americans' freedom to use their cars and trucks would be conditioned on the operation of that technology and could be snatched away. All this technology is required in autonomous vehicles. I haven't even gotten to what I'm trying to get to, which you're absolutely correct. I care about saving people's lives. In a bipartisan way, working with one of the most conservative senators here, Rick Scott out of Florida, we were able to earn votes of our Democratic colleagues 3 years ago. Under the Biden administration, under Pete Buttigieg, they dropped the ball. They didn't finish the rulemaking. I asked Secretary Duffy about this. I didn't know this. He shared that his wife survived a head-on collision.
That's right.
As well. He knows what's going on here. That's the reason I'm trying to get to the bottom of this. When we talk about autonomous vehicles and this innovation in America, America should be the driver here. And it's going to be expensive. It's going to be expensive, but we need to keep people safe so that when they choose to buy that vehicle, they're not going to die and they're not going to get killed on the road. So I certainly hope that we can get to this place and just get something done. My last question about following the law, Mr. Bradbury, is do you commit to follow the law concerning finalizing the impaired driving rulemaking?
We will follow the law as directed by Congress with regard to that. And we will proceed forward, and as I indicated, I look forward to seeing the information that's come in and talking to industry, talking to those who know more than I do about what that technology can achieve. I believe that's what Congress wanted NHTSA to do. And I recognize that some forms of that technology may be closer than others. So, for example, the technology in a starter button that can sense through the skin blood alcohol content and might prevent a car from being started. That's a kind of technology that may be closer on the horizon in terms of accuracy and reliability.
And Mr. Bradbury, please send some additional response to the record. I know I'm over time here, but it might surprise you if you're not aware that I think Volvo, Subaru, their cars already have this technology. They're driving on the roads in other countries. They're not here yet. But nonetheless, the technology has been proven. If you go to the auto shows, like I like to do, you can get in them and check it out. I mean, it's pretty incredible what they've done.
I look forward to doing
And this legislation did what it was supposed to. It got the market to respond. Major auto manufacturers are filing the patents to do this stuff. It's quite incredible when you can touch those conditions and then you let the innovation just get out there and solve these problems. But we can save people's lives. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Just a real, very fast question back to you. Let's say that we do that. Mandate everything. Look, as a former car dealer, let's load up the car with every option possible. The price of cars has gone from $40,000 to over $50,000. People will buy less cars, not because they don't want the technology, they can't afford it. What's better? A newer fleet of cars where people buy more new vehicles, or these insanely expensive, really cool cars with all kinds of crazy technology that nobody affords, so they keep their old car? What makes the entire fleet safer?
I think as you put your finger on it, you know, the average age of the automobile in the U.S. fleet is approaching 13 years. This is a serious national problem. We have older and older, we have cars that are 25 and 30 years old on the road that have gone through 4, 5, 6 different owners. These are far less safe in a highway crash than newer vehicles. So affordability is a critical component of safety. It also is a critical component of economic happiness and quality of life for Americans. We should want Americans to buy more new vehicles, and that really should be a goal. So that's why I say it has to be a balance.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not asking for the cars to fly. I just don't want people to die. That's all that I'm saying. I think we can find common ground here.
We're asking them to be insanely expensive and unaffordable, and people will keep their cars. I recognize Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bradbury, good to see you. Congratulations again on your nomination, and thank you for spending some time in my office going in depth on a variety of questions. Mr. Bradbury, one of the key responsibilities of the Department of Transportation through the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, as you well know, is to thoroughly and transparently investigate and hold accountable auto companies when their vehicles are operating in an unsafe manner on our roads. This is especially true for autonomous vehicle technology when that is in play. And as you know, I strongly believe that autonomous vehicles will play a huge part in improving roadway safety, but that can only be achieved if there is public trust, which we talked about in my office, in these technologies. And that only comes with full transparency and accountability so the public truly trusts this technology and its capabilities, or if they don't have abilities, to understand exactly what they're dealing with. Tesla, unfortunately, has been probably the worst actor in this space. There's currently an open investigation into Tesla's quote-unquote full self-drive, which it's not. They market it as full self-drive technology. And indeed, there's a history of Tesla misleading consumers regarding what that technology is actually capable of doing. And unfortunately, that has led to deaths as a result of that. So my question for you, sir, is given Elon Musk's close relationship with the president and his significant role digging into the operations of every agency through his so-called Doge, are you fully committed, and will you fully commit today, to ensuring that the Department of Transportation holds Tesla accountable if you are confirmed?
Yes. And I believe the Secretary was very firm in saying he would not treat any particular company favorably vis-a-vis other companies. In other words, we would have a fair and objective approach. And with particular regard to NHTSA's recall investigations on these important issues. And so I can make that commitment, yes.
Okay, good. In our meeting, you and I discussed the role of Congress in making the law versus the role of the executive branch in enforcing the law and faithfully executing the law. You told me that if the president disagrees with certain programs, he should ask Congress to act to change them. You confirmed that that's how the system, and I don't want to misquote you, but you said that's the way it should act, is my understanding. However, this administration doesn't seem to respect the separation of powers and appears to be pursuing an agenda to pick and choose which laws to enforce and pick and choose which grant funding to follow through on as well. Many of these grant programs, from Great Lakes port infrastructure development to new bridge funding to passenger rail projects, are certainly absolutely essential to Michigan and states across the country. Legally awarded funding for these projects shouldn't be ripped away because the president may have a political issue with it. So my question for you, sir, is if confirmed, will you oppose any attempt to withdraw infrastructure funds that have already been announced for infrastructure projects through the Department of Transportation?
Well, Senator, I think, first of all, as we know, a huge amount of additional spending and money has been announced and has been awarded in recent weeks and months. And I believe it's entirely fair for the President and the Secretary to want to take a hard look at how that money is being spent. And in lots of these programs, as I indicated earlier, there are points in the process where there's discretion for the Secretary and decisions can be made. And I think we need to audit all of those and take a hard look. And I believe that's what's really happening, and I think that's a fair process. I think the American people expect that. We want to ensure that we're prudently and responsibly using the taxpayer dollars. That's not the same thing as the executive branch overriding the role of Congress in its appropriation function and its lawmaking function. I absolutely agree that the constitutional structure is Congress makes the laws, Congress appropriates the money, the executive branch executes and implements those programs. But in lots of these programs, there is some discretion assigned to the executive branch and exercised. And we just need to ensure that that is being exercised responsibly, and we're not inserting unnecessary requirements that detract from the effective use of the money, for example. And then, as I mentioned, there may be cases where the president believes a program is simply is wasteful or not achieving a useful purpose and needs to be reconsidered. And I think it's fair for the president to put that forward to Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Recognize Senator Markey.
No, thank you so much. Mr. Bradbury, I've been in Congress long enough to remember when the auto industry used to say it's not cost effective to put airbags in vehicles. Raises the cost of the automobile. And didn't want to do it, fought it. But hundreds of thousands of lives have been saved because of airbags. What price do you put on that? All those lives that are saved. So I just raise that as a rhetorical question. Mr. Bradbury, thank you for being here. In the last few weeks, Elon Musk and the Doge team have wreaked havoc on the federal workforce through buyouts and mass layoffs, despite assurances from Secretary Duffy that public safety workers would be spared and critical categories of workers such as FAA technicians and engineers that inspect aircraft were fired. Musk and his group of unqualified cost cutters say they are doing this in the name of rooting out waste and excess in federal programs. Mr. Bradbury, you worked at the Department of Transportation during the first Trump administration. Did you witness significant waste and excess during your tenure during the Trump years at the Department of Transportation?
The Department of Transportation has an important practical role, and I think the career staff at DOT carries out that role with dedication and professionalism. I admire them greatly. It was not my experience that there was a lot of excess staffing. I do know that staffing has increased considerably since then. The funding has increased considerably. There are a lot of new people who have been hired.
That's not accurate. When you left, there were 57,000 employees at the Department of Transportation. And today, as we sit here, there are 57,000 employees at the Department of Transportation. And as you just observed, you did not witness excess when you were there with those 57,000 workers. And today, the workforce is the same. So obviously, I'm a little confused where the excess might have been created if it's the same number of workers.
If I may, we can always get more efficient. Industry does that, and there's always a need to take a look at where we can do more with less, where we can improve outcomes with greater efficiency.
No, and that's a different question, okay? That's a different question, okay? You could have made it a lot more efficient, is that if that's what you're saying during your time during the Trump administration, and I wish that you had, but to then impose that on a Department of Transportation with the same number of employees, I think is unfair. So this is, without question, going to be a difficult subject area, but the burden of proof to prove that there's excess is clearly on the administration, not just an assertion of it, given the fact that there was plenty of opportunity for 4 years for it to be rooted out in the previous administration. And for the sake of argument, let's say DOT has suddenly become bloated over the last few years. If an administration were intent on rooting out that excess, do you agree that identifying the positions to cut without risking public safety would take a little time?
Well, it's an important goal. It's critical. And I think the Secretary is committed to that, and it needs to be managed. And I would look forward to being involved in helping him manage that process.
So it is fair to say it would take some time then, given the fact that there were 4 years during the first Trump administration to root it out, it would take a little time right now to identify that excess? In other words, just to contrast that approach with what these Doge boys are doing inside of agencies right now. They're doing just the opposite. They're going in and slashing without having done the evaluation that professionals like yourself had an opportunity to do, and they have no professional background in doing it.
My impression is what's involved is very smart people with new analytical tools that haven't been available perhaps or haven't been used in government previously can very efficiently identify areas of obsolescence, areas of waste, areas of inefficiency, and we can address those.
And again, I'm not disagreeing that there could be a study, but I don't think 4 weeks really is enough time to have analytical tools applied to an area of expertise where there has been no access to it up until just January 21st of this year. So that's where the problem sets in, because brilliant people like yourself were not able to do it. And with all due respect to the Doge boys, I don't think that they have a superior knowledge of the internal workings of the Department of Transportation.
I'm not a software engineer, I'm not a brilliant tech person, but it does seem sensible to bring in some of those brilliant
And again,
tech
I don't have any problem with bringing in new approaches, but software is only the information you put into it. It's who writes the analytics, okay? It has nothing to do with the zeros and ones. It's all has to do with what was the assessment of the actual factual information put into it. And 4 weeks is not enough time to figure that out, no matter how smart you are. You can write an algorithm, but only with the information that is given to you. So there's just no way that the administration is conducting a careful review of the cuts and its impact on public safety. And there's no reason that DOGE is targeting probationary employees first. It's not because they are the most expendable or the worst performers, it's because they are the easiest to fire. And really, that's what it's all about. But it can directly endanger American lives if it's not done correctly. And that's why today, this morning, I sent a letter with 12 of my Senate colleagues in a letter to Secretary Duffy urging him to cease these dangerous workforce cuts and demanding answers about where the layoffs, the buyouts, the firings were happening within the department. So there's transparency, so we can understand where the cuts are, so we can see where the safety risks may be. So otherwise, it's just reckless endangerment that will be occurring. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to working with you, Mr. Bradbury.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bradbury, I wanted to go back, maybe a teeny bit of an expansion on what my colleague was just asking. Do you think there is a possibility that Elon Musk has conflicts of interest as it relates to the FAA?
Well, certainly has business interests through SpaceX that FAA is involved in regulating and licensing. And so I think it's important to ensure and be diligent that conflicts are not involved in this process.
What would you think those conflicts look like? Tell me a
Well,
scenario.
I don't know what the specifics would be.
Well, you know what the law says, right? You know what the law says.
Yes, and I think the president has made it clear
The
that
president exempted him illegally, I am sure, from the conflict of interest. And now he has real conflict of interest. And so I'm just trying to understand from you as the general counsel and a nominee, where you think that would cross the line. Because we already know that he basically has launch interests, and we already know that he got mad because he got fined for launching at a time when the FAA told him not to launch and then said that guy should be fired. So there's all sorts of issues right there. But now I'm asking, what do you think would be the bright lines that you would be concerned about?
Well, I think that the individuals involved in these activities, as I understand it, are coming in as employees of the department, maybe on a temporary basis, but employees
Do you
that
think
go
he should
through.
be an employee of that department if he has business before that department? 'Cause I'm pretty sure that doesn't exist anywhere.
I'm pretty sure that Elon Musk is not an employee of the department, okay? But the people involved in actually the activities under the supervision of the secretary are employees of the department and go through all the conflicts checks and requirements that are necessary for those to onboard those temporary employees and in terms of what they're engaged in. So I believe there is a conflicts check process that goes
Do you think he should sign a conflict of interest agreement, making sure that he avoids conflict of interest?
I don't.
Why wouldn't that be good, prudent business? Why wouldn't that just be good, prudent
Well,
business? Given this issue of, we just had this crazy, unfortunate tragic situation where DOD and FAA weren't talking to each other. And clearly, no one was in charge and responsible for, like, why in God's name are we allowing these two paths to intersect so closely? And now we have this increase, this committee's dealt with this a lot, this increase in demand for spectrum and FAA launch, and everybody has lots of different issues of when they want to do various things. So it's already a challenged environment. So why wouldn't we be concerned that somebody who's already taken a swing at the agency because they have commercial interests, that they wouldn't be influencing this whole safety regime, which has been the center of our discussion this morning?
Well, I view the whole DOGE effort as a way to take a hard audit look at systems, personnel, staffing, funding, and regulations to identify potential areas of inefficiency, things where it's not functioning.
Okay, I think, here's what I heard that answer, and I appreciate that to my colleagues. So I'm not focusing on DOGE as much as I'm focusing on where a true conflict of interest. So why don't you take that for the record and decide where you think a conflict of interest is and where you think that line would be crossed, and that would be very helpful to know from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bradbury. My final question is required of all nominees. If confirmed, do you pledge to work collaboratively with this committee to provide thorough and timely responses to the committee's requests and to appear before the committee when requested?
Yes.
Thank you. I have 23 letters of support from various organizations for Mr. Bradbury's nomination to be Deputy Secretary of Transportation. I ask unanimous consent that they be inserted in the hearing record without objection, so ordered. Senators will have until the close of business on Friday, February 21st, to submit questions for the record. The nominee will have until the close of business on Monday, February 24th, to respond to those questions. That concludes today's hearing. The committee stands adjourned.